Present the first speaker is Sebastian. He will speak first, Sebastian Zulueta. He is Executive Director of America Solidaria International. You have a history in your career as well, but I'm not going to go into the details because we want to spend the time on your speech and on the discussion afterwards. And you will talk about migration, the Chilean context. It was interesting to see from the previous speaker that, for those that were here in the previous session, that the census found that 0 of the homeless women had migrant background. So
yeah, but 10% the men.
10% of men.
Yeah, exactly. Sorry. Sebastian, the floor is yours for about 15 minutes.
Okay, thank you very much. My English is not really incredible, so I beg your help. Maybe some of you know this app, so you have to go in your phone to www.menti.com, and it will appear a place where you have to put the number of this code. And we are going to play a little in this presentation. I will ask you some help to do my presentation. So I want to know where are we from. So where did you born? Where I was born? I can tell you that I was born in Chile. Where did you born? You can also play.
Yes.
Do you want the city or the country?
Oh, excuse me, Santiago, the city. Chile, Adelaide. Okay. Victoria. Okay, well, we will go back then and see where are we from. CDMX. Okay, now I want to ask you, if you watching your phones, there are 3 statements and I want you to scale them. So the first one is, if we build higher walls, there will be less and better migration. I would like to know, what do you think about that? Then the second one is, there is a strong relationship between migration and homelessness. And the third one is, we have public strategies to work with homeless migrants in my city. So I just want to know, what do you think about these issues? Is it clear? Yes? Okay, everybody is voting. 4 people did vote, as you see here. 8 people did vote. Well, that's interesting. If you see the first one, well, it's a really interesting first statement, because we are in a moment that is really hot in this issue, and we think the same. I mean, in America Solidaria, we think that we have to demolish the walls so you can have a better migration. And the trends are going like in the opposite side, you know. It's like we have to make them higher, and we are going to have better and less migration. There is a strong relationship between migration and homelessness. Well, we see that there is a feeling there is a strong relationship, but when you look for research, you almost find nothing. That's incredible. So we had to do some research, some surveys, but we didn't find any. Some information have been developed by Fianza, but this is an important point, because we think we have to foster more research about this relationship, because we have a 10% among the male population in Chile, but also in different countries of Latin America and the Caribbean. They say that there is a lot of people that is migrant that is living in homelessness. And in the other hand, we have really few homeless migrants policies. So we think, for example, in Chile, we don't have any public policy for migrants homeless. So let's go. Now we're going to play, okay? We're going to make a quiz, and we have 14 players, and we are going to see who is going to win. Okay, let's go. You have to answer this question. If you do it in a fast way and in a right way, you're going to earn more points. What is the childhood poverty percentage in Latin America and the Caribbean? 12%, 22%, 32%, 42%. 13 votes. Okay, time is over. 32%. Well, most of you were wrong. We have 42% of childhood poverty. Why I put this slide? Because I work in America Solidaria. This is a continental NGO that is working to overcome poverty in the Americas. And we look for no child left behind, no child living in poverty. And there is a strong relationship between poverty and homelessness and migration. So just wanted to tell you that our scope is this one. Now we're going to see who is what. I don't see this name. Who is that ball? The 8 ball. Well, he is winning or she is winning. Oh, you're winning. Perfect. Okay, let's go to the next one. Let's ready to vote. In 1970, the overseas migration in Latin America and the Caribbean was 76%. How much was in 2010? 63%, 51%, 43%, 37%. 18 responses. Okay. You were almost right. Yes. In 1970, it was 76%, but in 1980 it was 63%. In 1990 was 51%. In 2000 was 43%, and in 2010 was 37%. So the overseas immigration to Latin America and the Caribbean is going down because the intra-regional migration is going up. So we're having more migration in between our countries, and different countries that were the destiny of the migrants now are not longer good destinies or selected destinies, because I don't know. For example, to Spain now the crisis, the economic crisis, is making that people that was migrant over there is going back to South America and the Caribbean. And for example, to United States, the percentage of people that is going outside the region is going down. So I will show you a picture that shows the pathways. This is a survey that is from 2010 and shows the pathways. Most of the migration is from Mexico. You have 40% of the migrant population of Latin America and the Caribbean that is from Mexico. we have 30 million people that is living outside their country, but 12 millions are from Mexico, and most of them are living in the United States. And here you have other pathways, but since 2010 until today, we have another trends. You have, for example, that there was a lot of people who was migrants from Colombia to Venezuela, but now they are going back. And you had a lot of people from Haiti that was going to United States and to Canada, and now they are going from Haiti to Brazil, most of them, and to Chile also. And you have inside the Española island people who is being like stateless because in Dominican Republic they are taking away their nationality and they are deporting them to Haiti. So that's the moment, and that's the last quiz. Okay, let's see. How many unaccompanied minors crossed the United States southern border between October 1st and July 31 of 2014? Okay. Perfect. Well, if you see 63,000 people, childs or minors, crossed the border. This is an incredible number, a huge number, and it talks about the weakness of the population that is being migrant in our region. Childs that are going to other countries because the causes are like violence, or they are looking for labor or work, or they are looking for reunify with their families. And that speaks about the fragility. Now, I want to share with you some hypotheses, and I want you to help me. So the first one is the migrant people present higher employment rates than natives. The second one, migrants that are homeless also were homeless before departing their countries or leaving their countries. And migrants who are homeless stay longer as homeless than natives. Okay, one response. Could be that. I think we are running out of time. So this is the, okay. Okay, in the first one, the migrant people present higher employment rates than natives. Our research show us that most of the Latin American countries and the Caribbean show that migrants have higher employment rates because and that they weren't homeless before they leave their countries. So they become homeless when they when they arrive to the country, and migrants who are homeless stay longer as homeless than native. No, our research and our surveys show us that they stay for a fewer time as homeless because they are really being migrants because they need to work and they need to send money back to their country. So they're really making high efforts to stay like that. So to finish, my last, well, here you have some research that shows that there are more employment rates for most of the countries except for Uruguay, that migrants are more unemployed, and for Costa Rica. Okay, but I won't make you play this time because we run out of time. So what we think in American Solidaria and with Kayalink that we should do. First of all, demolish walls, accelerate regularization of migratory legal status to access to public policies. I mean, when the migrants are nobody in the countries, they cannot access to the public policies. Of course, in the other hand, you have to make it possible for migrants to access to the public policies. But if you do that, you can prevent the homeless, the migrant homelessness. Somebody is helping me. The second one is transform the schools in an integral pole to deliver public opportunities. I mean, the high schools, the schools are places where you can integrate different public policies and where you can go and get the migrants' families. So those are really like important places to focus the public policy. Then fostering the access to local networks to support for vulnerable migrants. This is something we think is really important because the local networks, most of the times through the civil society organizations, can help to activate some capacities of the migrants' families, and you can let them go into the public policy or to develop their social capital. And the last one is to create a lived knowledge sharing process through international internships and international volunteering. We think that there are not enough research, but there are a lot of experiences. We're working here in New York and in Washington as American Solidaria. We also are working in Colombia, in Chile with migrant population and homeless population. And we think we can share knowledge between different experiences. So of course, we need more research, but we can start sharing the knowledge between the organizations and the governments. That's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Sebastian. Thank you for the original presentation. It's a first for me. I don't know for you, but never played during the presentation. It's fun and interesting, of course. If you agree, I'll let everybody speak and then have the questions to make sure that everybody has the time to make their presentation. So, Aslam Tamikinov from Kazakhstan will be our next speaker. He is associate professor at the Kazakh British Technical University in Almaty, in Kazakhstan, and worked as a consultant in various projects funded by US aid and the Department of International Development in the UK. And you will speak about migration, internal migration, if I'm well informed, in Kazakhstan.
Okay, hi everybody. I'm going to talk about homelessness, the relationship between the homelessness and internal migration in Kazakhstan, but I'm based on a specific example of the Almaty city. And my research partly was based on during my work, project activities, and various civil society organizations before I got my PhD, and partly during my PhD and afterwards. So, you may know that Kazakhstan is one of the Central Asian countries, and bordered by Russia to the north and by China to the east. And it's the ninth largest country worldwide, but the population density is very, very low in comparison with the territory scope. There are only 70 million people who are dispersed in 14 different cities, and the biggest cities are Almaty, its former capital, about 1,500,000 people there, and Astana, it's a new capital since 1997, so around 1 million people. So my focus will be in Almaty. It's a main trading, commercial, cultural hub of the country, meaning that it's very close to drive to China, only 2 hours, it's close to the city of China, and the trading and commercial activity boosted after the collapse of USSR. It's also a ground transportation logistical hub between China and Russia, and many of the ground transportation pass through Almaty. That's how it became a trading commercial hub. But most of the universities and other cultural activities are grounded with Almaty because of the former history of the capital city. The internal migration process has started after the collapse of USSR since 1991, and conditionally, the stages of the migration could be divided into two levels. The first is 1991 and 2005. The first stage captures this period where the internal migrants, homelessness issue, and housing issue mainly were tackled through self-regulations, bottom-up, mainly that due to the self-help, collective self-help culture of those people who migrated from rural areas to city areas. And they helped to develop self-initiated, self-built house models, but certainly with the facilitation and funding support, consultancy support of development agencies from the United States, the UK, the Netherlands, and Denmark. Where the second stage captures a period from 2006 up to present. It's still going on, when the government started to launch its first housing intervention. And my focus of presentation will be in a second stage because of the time limit and etc. And I would like to see, because of the coverage of the government intervention policy was nationwide. So whereas first stage were concentrated mostly in Astana and in Almaty. So I would like to talk about driving forces, what's the reason people to migrate. And conditionally, it could be separated into two levels. First is push factors, and second is a pull factor. What does it mean, a push factor? Push factor, it relates to the condition in the locality where the internal migrants come from the environmental and ecological point of view. And the red line, I highlighted the red line in the map, and in East Kazakhstan, historically and during Soviet times, there was located a nuclear test site. And it existed for 4 decades. From early 50s up to early 90s, and because of this military strategic reason, during Soviet time, it had about more than 400 nuclear tests. And I would like to just give a quote of former Internal Intelligence Service Director of the United States, Mr. Gates, who noted that nuclear arsenals in the eastern Kazakhstan were directly targeted the Washington, D.C. And from this point of view, it has a very strategic military reason, and any kind of negative environmental health effects for the inhabitants of that region, it's around 400,000 people, were completely ignored. And after the collapse of USSR, there was an influx of people from that region seeking access to the better quality of medical healthcare services, primarily. And from South Kazakhstan, again, it's a rocket launching site, the Kazmadum, Baikonur, and again, because of many launching of the rockets, it has a negative environmental impact to the people who are surrounded this community. And again, there was a big influx of people once the USSR was collapsed. And of course, the pull factors, it includes mainly seeking of access. People were motivated by accessing a better quality of education, healthcare, as well as accessing the job market, as bearing in mind that Almaty was a hub of trading and commercial activities. The definition of homelessness. During my study, actually, officially, there is no definition of homelessness in Kazakhstan, if you look at the policy papers. When they say homeless people, they mean only the single street homeless people who are living on the street or sleeping around. Whereas, and in our survey, in 2 neighborhoods of Almaty city, we paraphrased the 3 first dimensions of homelessness being used in European homelessness literature. And if you ask the people, are you homeless? Of course, the answer would be no, I'm not. But we paraphrase the there are three main dimensions of homelessness being used, including a fiancé, for instance, and fourth one is specific case related to the Kazakhstan, and I guess perhaps that's related also to former socialist bloc countries about lacking a registered address. Very quickly, I'd like to skip through. First, houselessness. It is a condition when individuals have a place to sleep temporarily in their relatives and supported networks, houses, and flats. And again, because of this Asian culture, you are expected to show certain kind of, network support for someone who comes from the rural area, and such were friends who came first and who became a nodes as a starting point for inviting other friends. And the second one is living in insecure and inadequate housing. That is a situation when people are threatened by severe exclusion, insecurity newer, threatened by eviction, living in extreme overcrowding or living in low sanitary conditions. And the social psychological dimension of lacking a home, that's interestingly, some people who were interviewed, they noted that especially in the first stage of the migration, when they came first to Almaty city, where the main business language in private sector is Russian, whereas these people mainly speak in the Kazakh language, and they noted that they experienced a little bit discomfort in the financial sector when they were started working in banking, etc. And sometimes they, as a place they come from, also could be like an undesirable social identity, and they have to like a little bit hide that. So that's another element when they try to feel a little bit discomfort from a mutual self-respect relationship with other people who used to be called like local Almaty residents. And final one, lacking a registered address. In order to address this last point, I would like to give a sample. Document showing a registration at a defined address. If I paraphrase it, it's like permanent, it's like a city visa, right? So here you have to have a place, a housing, dwelling, in which you have to have registration there. So this registration type, it's like a visa type, permanent and temporary. So permanent residence would immediately give you access to any kind of welfare services available in the city, whereas a temporary one would limit your access to that social services available within the city, and it created lots of debate. Actually, this idea comes from the Soviet system of registration aimed to create a barrier for and limit or holding back their rural residents' migration to big cities. But now it doesn't have such kind of regulatory idea. But mainly it's aimed to, as a main government argumentation is that we would like to have a data about internal migrants who will access, for instance, the healthcare services. We should think about calculate the city budget in advance. So that's a requirement for them. Now, I would like to talk about the welfare system of Kazakhstan, because the homeless migrants who migrated from different regions and rural areas, they were hoping, they were seeking an access, better quality, they were seeking a better quality of life. And the welfare system, generally speaking, comprises these welfare benefits, it's a social benefits, healthcare, housing sector, education, and pensions. The welfare benefits consist of three parts. It's a cash transfer, contributory social insurance, and voluntary social insurance. The contributory social insurance, it's like unemployment benefits. In order to access that, the internal migrant, homeless migrant, should be working in a company and should transfer 5% their monthly salary to state insurance company. And if they lost a job, they can get back the unemployment benefits. So if you are long-term unemployed, that's a big challenge. So you are not protected. In the case of cash transfer, it has two parts. First, it's related to called status benefits, status social benefits, aimed to specific group of people like single mothers, disabled people, families with a large number of children. And again, if you have a temporary registration, sort of like, as I told, a city visa, you can immediately access that. If you are a single mother or disabled people, or you have a family with large number of children. Voluntary social insurance, that's irrelevant to single homeless, internal migrant homeless people, because in that case you can buy the insurance system privately in the commercial sector, and usually that's mostly being done by rich people. Healthcare. The government provides universal access healthcare free at the point of use for the whole population. And everyone can use an access and for free. However, again, one of the criteria of accessing, you should have this registration at defined address that I already mentioned. And next one, pension system. Again, if you are internal migrant who are retired, then again you can access that. There are two types. First is contributory, second one is non-contributory. Non-contributory relates to the people who retired before the collapse of USSR. Whereas afterwards you have to again transfer 5% of your, you have to deduct 5% of your salary to state pension fund, and once you retire, you'll get back that accumulated amount of money. The idea comes from the Chile model, by the way. And next one is education system. It's free, again, for any citizens. One of the criteria accessing for primary, tertiary, or secondary school for your children if you are internal migrant, and you have to have again registration by a defined address, by place of residence. And the housing sector. Housing sector is, unlike to healthcare and education system, is not, it's not decommodified as Espen Andersen used the term. It means you have to tackle your housing needs in the market. But from 2005, there was started the first housing program aimed to the internal homeless migrant people. So I would like to talk about that. But before that, this housing program access again required a permanent registered address. That permanent registered address, it's very difficult to get the internal migrant because it requires your own housing. So it's a little bit paradox. If I have all my own housing, then why do I need access to the housing program? Then the internal migrants started to tackle it like informally, again using their support networks and as well as their extended families. I asked them, can you please register us in your house so that I can then later access to the housing program? And it worked to a certain extent. And housing program itself consists of two stages, 2005 and 2008, and 2009 and 2011. What was the ideology of the program? The government said the following way: okay guys, if you are internal migrant, if you are homeless, that's a social housing program subsidized by the government, please come and apply. But there are certain criteria. First criteria, can you please show that you have a permanent address registration? You show that, okay, great. Second, can you please show that you don't have any kind of home ownership? You show that, great. Okay, so can you please tell me, do you work in public sector? Because this program is called, specifically targeted the internal homeless migrants working in public sector. In the UK context, it's called key worker scheme, okay? That's teachers, medical professionals, police officers, etc. And then you show a document confirming that you work in a public sector. And then they say, okay, great. Now second stage, go to the commercial bank. You go to the commercial bank, and first question the bank person asks, do you have enough income level? So if you say yes, I do. Okay, great. Second question would be, do you have a 10% cash deposit out of the total cost of the flat? For instance, if the 3-bedroom room costs 42,000, for instance, you have to have 4,200 cash deposit. If you say no, you reject it. So, most of the people were complaining that this commercial part of requirements were in tension with social part of ideological part of the program. And the cost of the house was lower compared to private sector. I can give one example. For instance, if 2-bedroom flat in 2005 it cost $40,100, whereas in the market it would cost twice more. And from this case, it's a good site, but such kind of requirement of permanent address as well as the requirement of cash deposit excluded many people targeted as program beneficiaries. It created, some intentional homeless people and corruption element. Intentional homeless people means those who has enough money, suddenly they divorced, and they became like intentional homeless, saying, I don't have any kind of ownership. They might live together with husband or wife, but they separated temporarily in order to access this program. So, also the corruption elements means, there was many documentation falsifications. And the second stage of program took that kind of weaknesses into account, and the new stage of program said, okay, no any kind of requirements about cash contribution, deposit of 10%, and mortgage level of mortgages were lower, and compared to the first stage. In first stage, it's 10%. It is low by the measurement of Kazakhstani financial sector, whereas and I know that in Europe, in the US, like 300 point, it's a middle range, whereas in Kazakhstani case, it's 7%. And it was open to wider population of any kind of internal migrants. There was no any kind of requirement that you have to work in public sector. But again, one of the weaknesses in this housing policy and housing program remains that they don't take into account how people can get a permanent registration and a defined address if they don't have any housing. So not all people have a support networks. Not all people can ask their relatives to register them in their housing, in their apartment and flat. And now the discussion is going on that there should be some kind of temporary accommodation for internal homeless people, especially families. So whereas they can have a transitional period, and it could be designed like a building of budget small size flats, or in the UK context that would be studio flats for family migrants, and also creating the emergency shelters for the family internal migrants. So we've got the shelters for single homeless street people, but internal migrants, they didn't want to go there, telling, well, we are not street homeless people. Yes, we are homeless, but we don't want it to be labeled and associated, and it might create any kind of, social distancing of other groups of people we work with, and etc. So, and now also the government is thinking about more active involvement of civil society organizations, because they've got a great experience during the first stage of the migration process between 1991 and 2005. Okay, that's briefly about internal migration and homelessness.
So that's Volker Busch-Geertsema. He is a professor in an institution called GIS. It's an Association for Innovative Social Research and Social Planning in Bremen, in Germany, and he is the coordinator of the European Observatory on Homelessness, which is a network of academics doing research on homelessness in the European context. So Volker,
Thank you.
Yours, and you will talk about asylum and homelessness.
Okay, I will first just say a few words about the complexity of migration and homelessness in the European Union, because that's needed to make clear that I will only speak about a certain section of this problem, and will focus on a recent wave of asylum seekers coming to Europe. Give some numbers, speak about the impact on services for homeless people, and about future risks, because we were probably a little bit early with this study, which you can find also in the internet, asylum seekers, refugees, and homelessness, and some conclusions. The largest part of internal migrants, just to make that very clear, between the EU member states is not destitute or homeless. They're just working somewhere else. They are using the freedom of movement, and there's quite a large amount of people not being nationals of their own countries, but being nationals of, of the EU and working somewhere else in the EU. We have very different groups of migrants, of destitute migrants, and they are, of course, also not homogeneous either. We have people with no papers. They have either entered the country without legal status, or they have stayed on after legal stay, for example, when they were students, or they are rejected asylum seekers. They're often trying to hide from authorities, so they will usually not make use of officially paid for homelessness services, but they will use low threshold and anonymous services. Then we have a group which is at the moment, I think, in quite a number of European countries, more prominent or more prominent in discussions. These are internal EU migrants who are destitute. There's a free movement between EU member states to some extent. There are still large differences in living standards between the member states, and particularly disadvantaged and stigmatized groups, especially the Roma from Bulgaria and Romania, are found in a number of the northern Western European states and being destitute, also people from both Poland. They have often a legal right to stay, but restricted or no access to subsistence benefits and accommodation. If they are not defined as part of the labor force, that's very important. What is widespread, especially in countries like the UK, we have the reconnection services, while many of these people don't want to go back in their countries where they have very little chances to live a decent life. And then we have the asylum seekers and others fleeing situations of humanitarian crisis coming to the EU, and I will mainly speak about the last group. In 2015, the EU experienced an exceptional influx of asylum seekers, total numbers of asylum applications exceeding 1.3 million persons. While the numbers of newcomers diminished sharply from late 2015 onwards, another 1.2 million applications were registered in 2016, but that were mainly people who came into the country already 2015 and then were given a chance to be officially registered. It has to be said, in relation to the EU population, which is about 508 million, is still a very tiny proportion. It's about 0.5% in the 2 years who came to the European Union. The most prominent countries of origin were Syria, Iraq, Afghanistan, and Libya. But the EU member states were affected to a very different extent. More than 60% of all applications for asylum were registered in Germany, Sweden, and Hungary, but in Hungary was mainly for transition to the other countries. In 2015 in Germany, Germany as a country, here I'm comparing the three countries with the most, with the largest population. Germany received more than 6 times as many asylum seekers as France, and more than 12 times as many as the UK. You can see there is a big difference. In 2015 and 2016, Germany alone registered more than 1.22 million applications for asylum. They were struggling with provision of sufficient temporary accommodation. They had, in some places, have put up a lot of tents, containers, sports halls were used, etc. But there's large regional variation. You find that in the large cities, but in the small cities, they might be immediately housed in regular housing. The pressure diminished by closing of the so-called Balkan route and agreements with Turkey late 2015, early 2016, and by increased border control in several countries. There were increased efforts to send back asylum seekers who have not been granted international protection. There is a duty to provide sufficient support for asylum seekers during the process of application, but there's large variation of practices among EU member states and a high variation of rates of positive decisions. For example, Denmark granted asylum to 81% of all asylum seekers, Germany to 57%, Poland and Hungary only to 15%. We did a study in 2016 from the European Observatory on Homelessness, a very basic study just based on questionnaires on the consequences of the recent wave of asylum seekers on homeless services in selected EU countries. We selected 12 of the 28 member states: Denmark, Finland, France, Germany, Greece, Hungary, Ireland, Italy, Poland, Portugal, Sweden, and the UK. And again, I have to say that there were high variations, more than 5,000 applicants per million inhabitants in Germany, in Finland, Sweden, and Hungary, and much less than 1,000 per million in Ireland, Poland, Portugal, and the UK. So you can have a very different level of how this impact has been felt. Some countries were rather transition countries in the south, like Greece, Italy, but also Hungary, struggling with high numbers that lacked resources, and the more affluent countries in Northwestern Europe are the main recipient countries. In many European countries, there's a very strictly separate system of provision for asylum seekers waiting for a decision. They will be provided with accommodation, with means of subsistence that's completely different, completely separate of the regular homelessness services. In these cases, the potential consequences for regular homelessness services were only to be felt after an asylum decision granting international protection or rejection was felt. So we still had no visible effects on homelessness reported in some countries like Denmark, Finland, and the UK for different reasons. And only for some countries like France, like Greece, like Italy, a sharp increase of use of homelessness services by asylum seekers was reported in mid-2016. But in a sense, our study came a little bit early because we weren't sure if we really, the responses of many of our interviewees were, wait and see, we don't know the consequences. So risks were reported that in the near future, those persons granted international protection would end up in the service sector for homeless people because they could not find permanent housing. There was a clear increase, of course, of pressure on housing markets in several countries where shortages of affordable housing had been severe before already. Especially in Italy and Greece, the limitation of resources for the asylum seeker systems led to asylum seekers living rough, squatting, and using homelessness services. In France, there was quite a special case because they have specialist asylum seeker accommodation, but it was much too limited. And there's also a tradition of being open, having emergency accommodation open for all homeless people, also to asylum seekers. The pressure on this accommodation was reported as being very high, and many thousands of asylum seekers were sleeping rough. And in other countries, this was not. We could not prove any of these impacts at the time of the research. But as I said, risks were reported for the future. An increase of levels of homelessness after providing international protection in countries with critical shortages of housing, of affordable housing, particularly severe for single people, because very often the housing market is not so overburdened with families, because traditional in many countries you have housing policies directed to homeless, not to homeless, but to families and not to single persons. There will be discrimination blocking the access to private rented housing for asylum seekers. And there were, as you might have heard, a lot of political tensions about supporting measures for refugees, which were exploited by the far-right parties. Other risks reported for the futures were that there will be potential competition between two types of competition. Well, one between the migrants and the non-migrants, the non-migrant homeless people, and between migrants with different administrative status, also between the groups I've mentioned in the beginning. And there might be an increase of rejected asylum seekers with no access to services whatsoever, not to social benefits, not to the labor market, not to regular housing. An increased pressure on charities providing basic means like food, clothing, hygiene, health, etc. And also pressure from authorities to exclude irregularly residing migrants from such services. And on the other hand, of course, there was the risk of insufficient integration measures for those granted international protection. But that's the main point, having an influence whether this will be realized, these risks will be realized in the future. Fianza has called several times for an inclusive approach to reception and accommodation of asylum seekers. This involves to reaffirm that everyone has the right to reception and support regardless of their administrative status, to protect associations managing social and community health services, to invest in accommodation facilities and develop housing solutions, to guarantee access to basic services and facilities regardless of administrative status. It was also several times underlined that a fundamental change of European asylum and integration policies is needed, that on the one hand respects fundamental rights and is coordinated on a European scale. I actually lose confidence in that will be ever the case. That provides safe and legal routes to protection, and that provides accommodation support which meets standards of decency and dignity, and also integration measures. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Volker. So now it's your turn. So we heard from the situation in Latin America, the recent changes in migration, how it impacts on homelessness. We heard from Kazakhstan, and then we heard from the asylum crisis, and the impact of it on homelessness in Europe. So if you have a question, say who you are and who you... Yes. Yeah, you stole the remote control. Say who you are, and if you have a question, to who you address the question, or if you have a comment, that's fine.
Thank you very much. I'm Wayne. I have a question for all three. Aslan, you mentioned about migrants and voting. In South Africa, we have the issue of people that are homeless. If you do not have a physical address, you cannot vote, so you have no political influence at all. You cannot open a bank account, you cannot go to a hospital, so it's difficult to access any services. But the voting is a big part, so what happens during political campaigns, our politicians campaign in places where it so-called matters, because homeless people do not, in that sense, matter. So, as you are from three various places, how does that relate to your countries or your continents, if it can be answered like that?
I'll take a few questions if you don't mind, because I saw all the hands, but they are... sorry, there.
I have the question related to mortality and morbidity amounts. So not so much about homelessness, but it would be rather long-term homelessness and mortality and morbidity for the migrants. Because my experience is that for maybe not a lot of people, but for certain numbers of them, it's correlated with high mortality and morbidity. So I would like to know what she experienced in other countries.
Maybe one more question. Somebody is desperately trying to... Yes, it's better.
Thank you. My name is Isabel. I'm interested from your presentation, Aslan. You were talking a lot about migration, internal migration, and the national housing policy. And I wondered if there was a difference, if that policy was focused almost like an affordable housing policy, as opposed to a housing policy for people who were sleeping on the streets or rough sleeping.
Okay, who wants to start?
Okay. Just to say, the legal situation between asylum seekers and others, especially after the asylum seekers got international protection, is very different. I mean, the asylum seekers, from that point onwards, if they are accepted, they have all rights to access. They have a right to social services. They have a right to minimum benefits, etc. And I'm not sure about full treatment. I don't think so. But but in terms of access to services, that's very different from if they're rejected, or if they are without papers in the country, or with the EU migrants. The funny thing about the EU migrants is that they have the right to move as long as it's accepted that they are looking for work, but then they have no access to social services and to minimum benefits. In Germany, we have just very recently had some decisions and new legislation which tries to prevent them from getting any benefits for the first 5 years, which is quite a long time.
Thanks for the question about the voting access. When I was writing my abstract, this was a big problem actually, abstract for this conference. But a month and a half, it's about in March of this year, there was amendments to the migration law and the registration system. And according to the registration system, landlords, they are required by law to provide a registration, temporary registration for the tenants. Before that, it was a problem of internal migrants. Use your support networks, find your relatives, it's your problem. So they were excluded from voting process. But since March, as this new law came into force, they can vote using their temporary registration for the defined address. So this problem is more or less now tackled, but we will see how it happens in practice. Nevertheless, landlords are a bit reluctant to register as a tenants for temporary because it's a little bit bureaucracy. They have to go there and be present physically, fill out the form, and after months if you say, I won't be able to pay, so I will move to change my flat again for them, like headache, they have to go back. So generally speaking, landlords are reluctant to provide a temporary registration for a defined address, but nevertheless, that law enforcement, they had some fees, penalties, so we will see how it happens in practice. But in theory now, the voting process is available for homeless people.
Yes, I think the question
Yeah.
from Isabel was
And Isabel, about I mean, just you immediately captured the gap of this nationwide housing program. It's called, first program is called State Housing Program, and this continuation called Equitable Housing Program, but it excludes the rough sleepers. So it didn't target the poorest population in the society.
About the voting in Chile is not a problem because if you have the national identity card, you can vote. So it's not a problem. But for the migrants, it's difficult to get the nationality, so that's a problem. I mean, Latin America and the Caribbean, we have different cases. And about mortality and mobility, it's an interesting question. I mean, there are different types of migration. You know, in the United States border with Mexico, there are a lot of, I don't know how you say in English, but coyotaje, coyote. Yes, so there is a lot of cases in about that. I don't have statistics. And what we have found is a lot of problem when a migrant can die in another country to repatriate the body. So that's a huge effort, and most of the times it takes money, and nobody is going to give money, so the people are staying in the country where they get died. But I don't know if you have some experience about that. Maybe I should ask you the question, because you tell us that you have experienced some relationship between treaty and mobility.
Yes, maybe you can come back.
Yeah, because Volker was speaking about migration or even European people who migrate to another country and they are homeless. But they are not only homeless, they are much more at risk on the long term to die because there is no solution. If they don't want to go back to their country, they don't have access to minimal income. So we are directly confronted with the fact that you cannot house them. So if they have, for example, a psychiatric problem of alcoholism, they just stay in the streets with that problem. And if they don't want to go back to their country, there is little you can do. So, for example, in Brussels, last year there were 40 people who died in the street, and among them, 20 of them were from Poland. So, and it doesn't really astonish me, because they are much more at risk. And we don't have any clue to solve the problem. The only thing we can do is trying to persuade them to go back to their country. And in some cases you can regularize the situation, and then you have some help and you can go out of this situation. But otherwise you just watch people dying in the street. I mean, it's so. I was wondering if there are some specific studies about that, because I think it's a problem which is not really well understood by European authorities.
Yeah, I'm not aware of any studies, but maybe Volker knows now. But that doesn't mean that the studies don't exist.
Yeah,
Yes,
just taking the question forward.
You need a microphone, because otherwise it doesn't get translated. Sure.
Just taking the question forward. In fact, I was wondering, because we got the news about people from Iraq, Syria, and all these people moving into Europe, and they were seen as refugees actually. So not primarily as migrants, but I think there's a difference also, when you're seeking refuge, because you're seeking refuge from one disturbed situation in your own country and moving to a new country, and so surely there are certain UN protocols which come into play, right? And that's why I think, Volker, you're talking about, when, I think the countries take care of it. So I think, there are a couple of problems, when you seek refuge, because as you're saying rightly, you can't just go back, because your country, I think, the situation there is not, like in Afghanistan and other places, we have got Afghan refugees in India, we've got Burmese refugees, here in India, we've got people from Bangladesh and Pakistan and all that. So I think it's not that easy to throw them out like that, and then that's when we start talking in terms of they're residents, of a particular place. Instead of being citizens, I think UN talks about them as residents. So as residents, they have particular rights. So how is it that you see this situation as well? Because I think it's a grim situation actually. Because world over, the disturbed situation that we have, I think that calls for a much needed attention as such. Yeah.
But still, we really have to distinguish the two groups. You have the asylum seekers, as long as they get the right to stay and international protection, they're quite well served. At least in my own country, in Germany, you have access to everything. That's not the problem. What he's speaking about is much more about the internal migration, which is unwanted by the national states, where they create a new kind of. It remembers me very much about a long history of dealing with people with unsettled way of life in the national or non-local poor. You provide for your local poor, but you don't provide for your non-local poor. and that's now in a European level a very similar situation where they say just go back where you come from and search for help there, and that's really. But then, if you get into details with that, it's very complicated because as long as they can prove that they are part of the labor force, even if they are unemployed or they are underemployed, they would earn a little bit of money by selling a street newspaper or so. There are chances to get into subsistence benefits, get some support, but it's a very difficult thing, and the most destitute are really in this situation which you described. We have that in Germany as well. Even hospitals rejecting them, saying you're from Poland, nobody will pay for your health care. Go away, even if they are really in a very bad health status. So you have these situations, and I think in a way we would need a European policy as we have national policies for treating the non-local poor. But it doesn't seem to get very near to that at the moment. And they have of course all these national parties. You might have heard about all these.
Yes.
And Brexit and all that
Yes.
fueled by rejections of the European Union, allowing other people to come to their national countries. Yes, please.
In your research, have you found anything of migration and people that are stateless?
It was not a specific thing we asked for. It might include people who are stateless as long as they get as they're in the asylum-seekers procedure. I mean, the other people who are really in a very bad situation are those being rejected asylum. And you mentioned Afghanistan. At the moment, there's a lot of debates about can you send people back to Afghanistan in that situation. And they are also in a very bad situation. I have no direct knowledge about the stateless people.
There is issue with stateless people, and there is another issue which is called migrants in transit in Europe. It's Volker said that some people arrive in Italy, don't want to ask asylum in Italy because there is a rule that if you ask asylum there, it's more difficult to move on to another country. So they try to transit out of Italy to another country, to the country of their choice, to ask for asylum there. And while they're in that situation, they're called migrants, asylum seekers, migrants in transit, and they have absolutely no rights. And it is in many thousands, and they sort of the group at the borders, like the French-Italian border has been closed for a while and is now strictly monitored, and there is thousands of migrants in transit that live in awkward circumstances, and that's also an issue.
We have that as well with where we have people, refugees, that wants to be resettled either to Canada or the US, and what happened is they camped out in front of the UNHCR, and the UN did not want to relocate them. And so later on, in a night operation, the city moved them illegally and locked them up, and not really resettled them, but dispersed them as far as possible. And they were part of people that we served, so we couldn't find them for many months. We didn't know where they went. The authorities didn't want to tell us where they gone, but they were isolated for the refugee help desk, and the UN declined to help them in any matter, in any way.
There was a question from the lady in the back.
Thank you. I'm Amy Klein from Baltimore. My question is somewhat specific. I had read an article recently that has stayed with me, and I just wonder if you've heard anything about this or could explain it. It is a condition that is affecting children in Sweden. Only in Sweden it's been found, where the refugee children go completely unconscious when they are told that they'll be deported, that their families will be deported. And it is a very strange medical condition. They become unresponsive for months and months, and the only cure, and then this is a legitimate article. and Volker, with your experience, I just wondered if you'd heard anything about this, and you haven't. Okay, well, I'll share the article. You may want to read it because it definitely, it is about refugee families and the serious mental health conditions that occur when facing deportation.
Yeah.
But what we can certainly promise is to find out from the contacts we have in Sweden if it's true, because in this post-fact era that we are.
Well, it's the New Yorker, which is a legitimate source.
Of
And
course.
it's a very in-depth article.
Okay, perfect.
I think
I'm not sharing fake news.
but the whole issue of minors is also a big issue in many countries, because it's they would normally, at least my country, it's a youth welfare issue. They should be treated like national youth people, and but you have a lot of people who can't get their family there. And there are a lot of trouble with people getting criminal, becoming doing little petty crimes and so on. So that fuels again a lot of resentments in the population. So I think it's a very difficult time for. I'm actually a fan of Merkel's sentence, "Wir schaffen das," which means we can do it. I mean, Germany is one of the richest countries. It's able, and it has shown in the past for repatriates coming from Eastern Europe that they are capable of integrating millions of people. There were years when we had 400,000 repatriates coming from Eastern Europe, and it was wanted. So the resources were provided, and I think if you provide the resources, it's no problem to integrate this amount of seekers, but it's not wanted by quite a part of the population. That's a big problem.
Yes, in the back.
So, I come from Czech Republic, and my country actually declined the quota on refugees. And part of the story was that there was a big public upheaval, or how we call it, against this. And people start saying that first we serve our homeless, and first we serve our Roma population, and all the groups that were marginalized before then became excuse why not to help refugees. But of course it didn't happen. Any more help didn't come to these groups. I wonder what's your experiences with this kind of arguments, and whether there was debate around this in Germany, in other countries, because of course the capacity you need to handle the refugee crisis maybe can somehow compete with capacity for solving homelessness.
Yes, of course. I shortly mentioned that you have different types of competition. You have competition between different types of migrants. These people from Syria are served, and us coming from Bulgaria, we are not served. And there is, of course, also in the homeless sector, there are voices of service providers saying this is too much. These people it's not our clientele, and also homeless people saying, why do they get housing and why don't we? But there's also quite a resistance by others in the service provision sector saying that many of the problems we had them before. They might have been exacerbated, but we had housing problems before asylum seekers came to Germany, and it's a problem of lack of affordable housing for everybody. But of course, there are these debates. Of course, they are taken up by right-wing parties, saying that the money is needed for helping our homeless people, although they didn't do a lot for helping our homeless people before asylum-seekers came to the country.
There's a question here in the front.
I'm a little hesitant to ask this in Volker. I think it might be a little unfair, but my understanding is that one reason why it might have been easier to integrate Eastern European migrants coming back to Germany is that they qualify as ethnic Germans by descent. And the people you're taking now are not only not ethnic Germans, but they're not from a Christian background either. And it might cause considerable tension. Now, I'm asking this because South Africa has a major problem with xenophobia and cross-border migration. And it's burst out several times into violence. And we're having a great deal of trouble integrating people who are particularly from other parts of Africa. Those are not the most difficult ones, but we have also migrants from the Middle East who are doing very well financially. And there's a lot of feeling around that. And we don't know when the next outbreak will be, but it looks as if it's likely to be one. So I don't know if you want to comment specifically on German ethnic feelings or on the general xenophobia issue in absorbing migrants, which I think we haven't really touched on.
So can I add another question, because I had a question to Sebastian earlier on, because we heard from in Chile that there was zero, in the census, that there was zero women from my background that were homeless. But when you showed the map with the changing migration patterns, I saw that there was a line from Haiti back to Chile, etc. Can you explain why homeless women, migrant homeless women, don't show up in the census? How is that possible in the context that you described? But maybe first, Volker, on the comments.
The thing about xenophobia, the interesting thing is that it's higher in those places where very few migrants live. I mean, in the whole east of Germany, there's much more xenophobia and much more rejection of people coming from these countries than in the West, or in places where you have quite a lot of where you have substantial Muslim communities already. We have a lot of Muslims living in Germany already. Turkish communities, millions of people living in Germany for many years, for generations. So xenophobia is, of course, a big issue, and you're right that it was easier and more accepted by the population to integrate those people coming from Eastern Europe. But I still would make the point that it's doable. It's doable. It needs more. I mean, in the beginning, the chancellor really backed it up, but then she had a big kind of drawback. So if you don't have the backing of the parties, of course, it's very difficult.
I think it works.
Okay. About your question, I think, it's only an hypothesis, but I think the women are not being like in a migratory homeless condition, because the migrants and the migrants always seek to work and to send back money to their families. So in Chile, it's really easy to get that kind of works, and they get really like hired by different places, formal or non-formal, non-regular works. So I think that's the reason. And about the refugees, we don't have much experience about refugees because most of the overseas migration has been from wealthier conditions than the natives. And now we have some pressures to receive some refugees from other continents, and I think that's like a kind of new experience, and refugees from Asia or Europe are kind of I don't know, they have a good reputation in our continent.
Thank you. We're almost at 5 o'clock, and it says in the program that there is a reception and a happy hour. I have no idea what a happy hour is. I'm joking, I know what a happy hour is. I know you all know what a happy hour is. So unless there is any urgent other questions, maybe just one comment on what you said earlier on about the Christian migration, Muslim migration. From the asylum seekers that came in the last 2 years, in most EU member states, it's mostly Christian, the asylum seekers. So there is often the perception that it's entirely Muslim migration, but it's not the case. And the other comment to just illustrate in a practical way what Volker was saying, how the flaws in European migration policy and national migration policy impacts on homelessness in countries like France, but also to some extent in Italy and Spain. About half of the people in shelter, in emergency shelter, are migrants, and most of them are undocumented migrants. So it's a massive problem in these countries, and it's growing. Just to summarize that a little bit. So thank you to the panelists. Thank you for you listening and debating with us, and enjoy the happy hour. I'll see you tomorrow. Thank you.